Let's get a critic's view on the astonishing success of Parasite at the Academy Awards from Piers Conran, a film critic based mostly in Seoul and a strong supporter of South Korean cinema. He kindly agreed to join us on Skype this morning to share his thoughts. So you must have been up late celebrating Parasite winning a remarkable 4 out of 6 Oscar nominations, including the 2 big ones, Best Picture and Best Director. Were you surprised it did so well, especially considering the movie and Bong Joon-ho were facing some really stiff competition in both of those categories?
Oh, absolutely. It was an extraordinary morning for us, a night over there, and the competition at the Oscars this year was, as you say, incredibly fierce. There was new films by Quentin Tarantino, by Martin Scorsese, and of course the presumed frontrunner Sam Mendes' 1917. And I think, you know, this award season has mutated over the months and weeks, and Parasite looked like a very interesting dark horse, but it was really just at the very end, the last couple of weeks, that it started to break away in certain categories. But even then, you know, while we could expect it to win Best International Film and maybe Best Original Screenplay, certainly the Best Director award was a complete shock. And I think Director Bong himself seemed pretty shell-shocked when he heard his name called out. And then once that happened, I think all the pundits and a lot of people watching the awards ceremony, myself included, started to think, could it go all the way? And well, here we are, and it did.
Yeah, you could certainly feel the hype building and building in the weeks prior to the Oscars, and especially, like you say, when it won the first Oscar of the night, you kind of felt something special was in the air. But in his acceptance speech for Best Director, Bong paid tribute to his fellow nominees, legends like Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino, and as you touched upon, Sam Mendes, and said that he'd like to share the Oscar with all 4 nominees if possible. Bong is now in the big leagues, there's no doubt about that. In your view, how does Bong measure up to genius filmmakers like Martin Scorsese and Tarantino?
Well, purely speaking from a subjective standpoint, I've been a huge admirer of Bong Joon-ho's for years, and it would not be unfair to say that he's my favorite filmmaker. So for me, it's a bit like the world is catching up to how I feel about him. But certainly, I'm not the only person who feels that way, and a lot of people consider him to be one of the greatest living filmmakers. And it's wonderful to see this recognition, and this means more people will be aware of just how great he is and will seek out his cinema. But of course, we can't forget that a lot of the greatest directors in cinema never got any awards at the Academy Awards. Names like Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick never got the big prize. So I guess Bong Joon-ho has a bit of a leg up on them now.
Well, it's amazing to think that Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick never won an Oscar, considering how amazing they were as filmmakers. But how much stock do you put in Parasite being the first South Korean film to win an Oscar, let alone 4? It will clearly do wonders for the film's box office takings. But when you look at Korean cinema right now, do you see anyone aside from Bong who has the ability to captivate global audiences like they have been with Bong's Parasite?
Well, certainly I think there are already some filmmakers that are at Bong's level and reached the level even before him. Directors like Park Chan-wook, of course, whose film Old Boy was the first Korean film to really kind of get people excited about Korean cinema around the world, particularly in the West. And of course, Lee Chang-dong, who last year almost became the first director to be nominated at the Academy Awards, when Burning was the first one to be shortlisted for the Best International Film prize. Beyond that, there's names like Na Hong-jin or Kim Jun, again, a contemporary of director Bong's, and there are a number of great new filmmakers coming out all the time, and I certainly hope also a number of women filmmakers who are coming up and doing very impressive work, like the director of Kim Ji-young, born 1982, which was a big sensation a few months ago. So Bong Joon-ho's success is wonderful, and he's a great filmmaker, and I hope it allows people to discover some of the other great filmmakers that Korean cinema has been turning out for years and continues to do so now.
Well, there's no doubt that lots of people are going to be checking out South Korean movies on the back of this win by Parasite. But one last question for you, Piers, before we let you go. Hollywood executives are going to be swirling around Bong more than ever now, let's face facts. What do you think his next step should be? He's ventured into Hollywood-style movies in the past with Snowpiercer and Okja, but his global success came with Parasite. Would you suggest that he shun the big Hollywood offers that will no doubt be coming his way and stick to making Korean films?
I kind of think he's going to end up doing both over time, the way he's already done. But he's also someone who prepares a long time ahead of time. So the next film that he does, if not the next two films, I'm sure have already been germinating for several years. I believe he does have two projects already in the works. So and I don't know what'll go first, but I know there is something he wants to do in the West. There is something he wants to do in Korea. So it remains to be seen which one that'll be. But perhaps there will be a lot of, let's say, influence thrown at him to do perhaps the American one at this stage.
Well, regardless, the world will be waiting with bated breath to see what he comes up with next. Piers, we'll let you get some rest. I assume you're going to be swamped with people wanting to talk to you over the coming days. Thank you ever so much for joining us at this early hour.
Thanks very much for having me.